What is going on, investors? Hopefully you guys are having a great day out there. That's right. You got to be having a great day. It is Friday, and that means it is time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show. Sorry we missed last week. I was at a wedding. So here we go. Let's kick things off on the FAANG Stock Recap Show. If you're new to the program, we recap all the news from all the FAANG stocks plus Microsoft and Tesla, and then we jump over to the charts and take a look at the price action. Unfortunately, my software updated, so I lost a bunch of my trend lines, but we'll talk. It kind of cleaned things up, and we'll talk about what's going on, especially with Facebook kicking that off. This thing approached and reached all-time highs, and including a 52-week high over the last week or so. Started around 320. We're up in the 330 range on Facebook. This thing has just been ripping higher. Now, Facebook is no longer removing claims that the virus was manufactured in a policy update. They were like booting people off the platform for floating what was believed to be a conspiracy. But now, after we've kind of researched some things, it's interesting that Facebook has kind of pulled this back. And I think this just broadly speaks to social media, maybe kind of should allow a little more open discussion on things before judging things. Again, that's more or less my opinion, but this is kind of an example of how social media's tried to like lead a narrative before we got the actual facts. I think something like this, especially if it is proven that the virus was manufactured, could lead to some changes for the way these companies regulate how content is shared on the site. And in my opinion, probably would be a good thing. EU prepares to launch an antitrust probe against Facebook's marketplace. You got to know your marketplace must be crushing it if they're planning an antitrust probe. So antitrust probe's pretty negative in general, but it does show that your product is absolutely killing everybody else in the market, so to speak. So we'll see how this materializes, but if you've been watching the show, this is just a regular thing, especially for the social media giants like Facebook, Google in particular as well, and in a certain degree, Apple. They are facing these not only here in the United States from competitors, from the government, but also from the EU and other governments as well. This was interesting. So Facebook is looking for a pay-per-view option to take hold of sports. Obviously, here in the United States, professional wrestling, boxing, mixed martial arts tends to be what people do pay-per-view for. But what I thought, they actually had an interesting idea here. Facebook can see using high school teams, maybe in college teams, and smaller sports leagues using the feature to make money for virtual attendance. So imagine if you had your son or daughter playing soccer at high school or tennis or whatever, grandma and grandpa probably wouldn't mind paying 99 cents, $1.99 to watch that match because it's pretty much impossible to watch it. So they gave an idea that they had this triathlon in Miami, and for $2.99, it drew 17,000 people. So I know in Facebook, that's not that many, but you've got these smaller events happening all the time. And that was more than actually attended the triathlon. Okay. So they got more people viewing than they were actually participating in that event. So it's interesting if Facebook can kind of find these niches. It'll be interesting to see, instead of playing like the Amazon game where they go for the NFL or Turner going for the NBA or the MLB or whatever. Well, yeah, those are really expensive, and those are more like partnerships or kind of sponsorships to the leagues, okay? Whereas if you can do these like micro events, yeah, maybe there's a play there and you could draw an audience. We'll see what happens there with Facebook. Apple started the week at 126, has slid sideways for like a week. When we get over the stock chart on this one, we'll talk about that. Apple is reporting plans to update the AirPods and AirPod Pros starting this year. I think it's probably presumed that this would happen since neither of these have had a significant update in a few years now. It looks like the base AirPods, the ones that are a little bit cheaper, those will basically get a redesign and be a little bit more like the AirPod Pros, and the Pros will get like a fitness sensor in there and some other little motion sensors and stuff like that in there. So that will be an interesting ad. We'll see if that can jolt that business line. Apple posted a job. This was interesting as well for alternative payment business manager looking potentially at a crypto push. So they're looking for Apple Wallets, payments, commerce, and lead alternative payment partnerships. So it'll be interesting to see if Apple pushes into the crypto space. When we've talked about Coinbase here on the show, it's a stock that I like from a fundamental perspective. I actually traded it this week, not to get too far off topic, but it's set up nicely for a trade. But Apple could bite into that business. Because imagine if Apple had their own crypto wallet, like what would that do to the business? Certainly they would focus on privacy and security, and it could draw more people into that market and could take business away from the likes of Coinbase. Apple wrapped up their Epic trial. That was Epic is the maker of popular Fortnite game. Obviously, they want to handle their own payments and not have to pay a 30% tax. We are expecting a ruling on this decision at some point. I didn't really get a definitive timeline, but it doesn't sound like it'll be soon. Okay, these judges have a lot of things to do, but this judge, Honorable Gonzalez Rogers, will be making a decision, but keep in mind that the decision will be subject to an appeal. I'm not an expert in court cases, but I know that no matter which way this one goes, the other side will be looking to appeal. And so we'll see. This is an interesting case just for the broader ecosystem out there. And it'll be interesting just to see how the judge rules on this one. And then obviously the appeal process after that. It'll be interesting to see how the judge interprets like a 30% tax. You know, there's taxes on all kinds of stuff out there. And so who's to say that Apple can't charge this tax when certainly other makers like Google and Microsoft and many, many other people charge the same thing, including did you guys do your taxes last week, or maybe it was the week before? You probably paid a 30% tax to somebody there too. So moving on to Amazon start of the week, basically where it was at, 3,230, and that's basically where it's at as well. When we get over the stock chart with Amazon, we see a nice sideways consolidation on this one. Now, big news, probably the biggest news out of all the FAANG names, is Amazon bought a Hollywood studio, MGM. I know when this first came across the tape, people were like, oh, the Aria and the MGM Grand that's going to be owned by Amazon? No, unfortunately, maybe not. Although those properties are really nice, especially the Aria, the Vidara, the city center there in Las Vegas. Very nice properties if you want a place to stay in Vegas. But this is the Hollywood studio of MGM, responsible for Basic Instinct, Angry Men, James Bond, The Pink Panther, as well as 17,000 TV shows, including Fargo, The Handmaid's Tale, and Vikings. I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't watch these Academy Awards or Emmys, but they've racked up 180 Academy Awards and 100 Emmys. This is the largest acquisition since Amazon acquired Whole Foods. I think Whole Foods was like a $12 to $13 billion deal. This one's in that $8.5 billion deal. I know a lot of people thought Amazon was a little cuckoo for buying Whole Foods. That, to me, on the surface, looks like a fantastic acquisition, especially as grocery really expanded last year, and Amazon's expanded quite a bit into grocery delivery, food delivery, things of that nature. So I don't think the street is interpreting this. I think what the street is doing is we had that kind of roll-up deal with Discovery and AT&T last week, that the Time Warner, essentially CNN, TNT, HBO, probably more significantly, tied up with Discovery. And I think what the street is looking at is looking at stuff like Netflix, which we'll talk about here in a second. They're looking at Disney, they're looking Viacom, they're looking at Comcast, and they're saying, wow, this industry is not only consolidating with Turner, HBO, and Discovery, but also you got mega players like Amazon, who just has mega distribution power with their Prime members and streaming that they have going on TVs and things like that, but deep pockets too. Okay, Amazon has the ability to borrow essentially unlimited amount of money. I mean, $8 billion to Amazon is nothing when they're doing $100 billion in revenue. So we'll see what happens in this space. Very interesting. Now, Amazon's Jeff Bezos is going out the door, and Andy Jassy is coming in on July 5th. They announced this, I think it was last week or maybe earlier this week. Andy Jassy is currently the head of Amazon Web Services, so he will become the CEO. Jeff Bezos will probably become a close advisor to him, but he will no longer be leading the day-to-day operations. Moving on to Netflix, start of the week at 502, slid sideways, kind of went up a little bit today. Basically in the middle of a range. When we get over the Netflix stock chart, we'll talk about this. Now, we've talked about here on the show, what is Netflix's next play? Okay, they have obviously dominated streaming, especially here in North America. Their next play is to keep expanding in Europe, India, all the other places that, where they're trying to expand their services. There's probably more of a runway to get more customers there, right? Okay, but here in the United States and Canada in particular, what's Netflix's next play? could be video games, okay? They're looking to hire someone to help in their video game expansion. And what's interesting with Netflix is they have some properties like Stranger Things and some other shows. Again, I don't watch a lot of TV, so I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I know that Netflix has a lot of original series that they could potentially turn into a video game. And then if I can play that on my Netflix subscription, maybe with like an Apple TV remote, or maybe I can somehow pair a PlayStation remote or something like that to it, or maybe just use my phone, maybe inside the Netflix app, maybe be playing games in there, could be an interesting way to monetize their business even more. Moving on to Google. Google just keeps going up, okay? Start of the week at 2,324. I should have said this at the beginning. I'm recording this at 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific time, so the markets don't close for a couple hours. So if you're watching this and you're like, maybe there's some crazy price action going into the weekend, we're heading into a holiday weekend, so I don't think we'll see crazy price action. But anyways, Google has melted up. They're a little off the high. The 52-week highs are 24.30. We're sitting at 23.70 on this one. We'll talk about, has the trend broken on Google chart? When we get over the chart, we'll talk about that. Now, Google is setting up their first retail store in New York City. This is they should say permanent here, because I think they've done some pop-up stores when they've launched maybe a Chromebook or a Pixel phone or whatever it is. They own Fitbit as well. Maybe people don't know that, but they do own Fitbit as well. And so now they're setting up a permanent store in New York City to showcase these lines, just like Apple has permanent stores as well. Google now going into that space as well, at least in New York City. Moving on to Microsoft, start of the week at 249, basically about where we're at right now. The highs on this one, at least on the 52-week high, is 262, so we're off that a little bit. We'll talk about if there is a buying opportunity for Microsoft. Video game sales dipped 2% as the comps proved tough to hurdle, okay? Remember this time last year, we're all sitting at home, all getting paid some cash money to sit at home and not work, or everybody was working from home remotely. So still a lot of people doing that, including myself. But basically everybody was sitting around playing video games too, okay, it looks like. And so it's going to be tough for them to comp over the next, probably the rest of the year. But you do have the new video game consoles, obviously the Xbox, and we have the PlayStation, and we'll talk about here maybe potentially from Nintendo as well. Although I tried to buy a PlayStation this week, and I could play double retail, but you can't really get them at retail unless you're willing to sit there on the internet and try to find these things. Nintendo is planning a new Switch console as soon as September. The Switch, I believe, this is off the top of my head, but I believe the Switch console is the best-selling video game console in the world, okay? Even bigger than the Xbox and even bigger than the PlayStation. And so this is big. If Nintendo comes out with this, not to say that it eats into PlayStation or Xbox in terms of Microsoft, but it is big that, whenever Nintendo does something, it does move the markets. Microsoft teases, this is big for Microsoft, teases the next generation of Windows, and it is, quote, coming very soon. So soon we are going to share, this is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. This is a direct quote from him. He says, soon we will share one of the most significant updates to Windows of the past decade to unlock greater economic opportunity for developers and creators. I've been self-hosting it over the past several months, and I'm incredibly excited about the next generation of Windows. So it sounds like, just from the quote from the CEO, maybe a little bit more open, like more open to apps, maybe more open to collaboration, maybe with other platforms, maybe with other operating systems. I don't know. It just sounds like opportunity for developers and creators. Sounds like maybe Microsoft's kind of opening it up a little bit, okay? We'll see what happens there. Moving on to Tesla, started the week at 578. This one's actually been moving upwards. So we'll talk about that, how it's, when we get over the stock chart, you actually see this thing kind of coiling out a little bit. I think Tesla's going to break one way or another. And by going up this week, could be teasing that its next move might be up, because we're way off the highs. This thing was $900 and we're sitting at 630. So, this one does have, so if it breaks to the upside, starts trending upwards in momentum, this thing could get up to the $900 range pretty quickly, actually. Tesla updated on transition away from radar for Model 3 and Model Y vehicles in North America. So instead of using radar, they're going to use a camera-based autopilot system. I don't know exactly why they're doing this, if they think it's better than radar, because they're still going to use Model S and Model S and Model X. They're still going to use radar, okay? And so I don't exactly know. Maybe this is more of a cost thing, that it's cheaper for them to go to a camera-based system and stick with radar on the more expensive models. Not exactly sure. I'm not really, a car buff, so to speak. Maybe if you know, you can leave me a comment down below. Tesla, now here's what's interesting, okay? So they're switching away from radar on the Model 3, and they lost their top safeties pick for the Model 3 after that radar decision. So obviously the Consumer Reports and Insurance Institute of Highway Safety, IIHS, pulled away a top pick for these. And look, I look at these when I'm thinking about buying a new car. I do consult these lists. They are flawed, okay? I don't need to get into a big discussion right now, but these lists by Consumer Report and the IIHS can be helpful, but they're somewhat flawed if you're trying to pick out the safest vehicle, which is something very important to me. We'll see what happens going forward with this one. We'll see if that has any impacts. Now, Tesla goes on the hunt for semiconductor chips. Tesla says, this is interesting. So Tesla is looking to buy a semiconductor plant as part of its effort to battle the global semiconductor shortage. So it could give them a competitive advantage. So these shortages, obviously, everyone's well known about these. Look, go try to buy a graphics card or a CPU, maybe to do some crypto mining or something like that, and you realize these things are super expensive, even the ones that are 2-3 years old. If you want to get one of the most recent models, good luck trying to find one in stock or one that's at a relatively affordable price. And the car makers, computer makers, Apple, everybody is having trouble finding these chips. And so I think that's going to be temporary. And how temporary? It might last another 3, 4, 5 months. It might last another 12 to 24 months. But what it will do will allow powerful competitors to start vertically integrating that. Okay, so Tesla could gain an advantage in the long run if they can get a semiconductor plant and they can start producing these things on their own, or have a little more tighter control over how these things are made. Now, the big news in the EV sector is Ford just went full-blown electricity. They modeled out their Ford F-150 electric truck. They got, I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe like $20,000 or $30,000, $40,000, 40,000 pre-orders for that thing. Look, here's the deal. With everything that Ford announced, so they announced, a tech stack, and they announced a Ford Pro business model. They announced all this stuff. Okay, it's still announcements. It still looks good on a PowerPoint. We still haven't seen the F-150 out on the road. Okay, yes, the president, I think, test drove one, and I think he threatened to run over a reporter with it, which was kind of odd, I thought. But we have test models of these things, but we don't have these things out in the wild. So we'll see how Ford is able to produce these things. But if they are able to produce an electric Ford F-150 and get it out to dealerships, I promise you it will sell. I live in truck country out here in California. Believe me, this thing will sell very well. So we'll see how this impacts Tesla in terms of not only its Cybertruck, but its entire electric vehicle a portfolio. We'll see as competitors like Ford, if they're able to, okay, it's still an if, because I've seen electric vehicles from Mercedes, Audi, concepts for electric vehicles from all these companies. And where are they? I don't think I've ever seen one driving on the road. Okay. They've talked about it. They've done PowerPoints. They've done, car show displays, but they haven't put anything out yet. Okay, so I will wait and see on that, but it does look promising. And look, Ford stock has been ripping higher. It's up at $14.50 a share. I remember when that thing was at $10. Tesla speeds up its timeline for its Model S Plaid deliveries. So this is their super fast Model S. It's kind of a niche product, but certainly will definitely attract buyers out there. This might be good news though for me. I have a pre-order on that Cybertruck, and I do want it. I do want to take delivery of it. I only have one car right now, and I would like to add a second car to it. And a truck would be somewhat practical at certain times. And so the fact that they're speeding up this, they have an event next week on June 3rd. It appears that they're speeding up. Now, obviously, it's based off the Model S platform. It's not a totally new platform like maybe the Cybertruck or their semi-truck or things like that. So it could be that it's just easier to get these things produced because it's basically a souped-up Model S. We'll see what happens, but the fact that they're pushing this up and the timeline for deliveries is a good thing. And certainly if you can afford one of these things and you're on the wait list for one, I'd be pretty darn excited about that. Now, moving on into the stock charts, let's talk about Facebook. Talked about how my app refreshed and I lost all my trend lines, but whatever. I think people probably, maybe especially new people, were tuning into this and they're like, man, that guy's got way too many trend lines and that's probably true. Okay. Sometimes it's better to just kind of simplify these things. Okay. Facebook was consolidating for a while. Then when we broke these highs, okay, Facebook had these highs here at 300. We talked about it. If it broke that on a big green candle, we had a big green candle, we retest. Look, you break above and you retest. The retest is actually, in a lot of technical, circles, this is where you buy, okay? You wait for the breakout and then you wait for the retest back to 300 and then you buy here, okay? And let's see if there's any, oh yeah, look at this. Look at where volume spikes, okay? Let's zoom in on this because this is actually an interesting lesson, not just for Facebook, but just in general out there if you're trying to learn how to read charts. Okay, so Facebook made these highs back in August of $300, and then it chopped sideways for a while. Okay, and we talk about consistently here on the channel that if you break above these highs, it is a bullish sign, especially on a big green candle. Okay, you had a big green candle, but look, this is the volume down here. Not a lot of volume as it broke through, but where did the volume step in? Okay, as you came back down and you retest 3 and then you got a bounce. Okay, notice we retested 300 because look, two things can happen here at 300. We can get rejected and we can come back down here, and that basically means this was just a little pump fake and we're stuck in this sideways consolidation between 260 and 3. But look what happened when the small candles started to just trend up. Look, these are small, they're red candles, but they're going up. Look where the volume stepped in. Okay, that is just showing you that from a technical perspective, this was a very bullish sign to break above 300, come back, retest, and bounce. Okay, that is when professional traders especially stepped in on this one because it's a very bullish sign. You went from 300 all the way up to 330 very, very quickly. In fact, it gapped up there. Now we retested again, and now we're off to the races again on this one. So this 300 level, you get any pullback on Facebook back to 300, that can signal a buying opportunity. Absolutely. Now we have hit our head a few times up here to 331. So what could be happening is we've channeled for months from 260 to 300. That's about a $40 range. It could be that we've started a new range down from 300 up to 330 on this one. Maybe there's some options plays, some things like that you can do on that one. Now, Apple looking very similar to Facebook, except we have not been able to pop up above. Okay, I've got my upper end of the range at 135. It's probably a little higher than that. I would say you're probably looking closer to 140 on a breakout on this one. That's where we've got a small cluster of candle here. So anywhere between 120, 135, Apple's kind of been chopping sideways. I have picked this one up recently, just under 120, maybe 119, 118, I think is where I got in on this one. But you come back down here to 120, 119. It is a buy, in my opinion, of Apple, especially longer term. Okay, much, much longer term. This is a company that I don't need to speak on the fundamentals or anything like that. You can always go watch our videos when we review the earnings. They're phenomenal. Okay, but what you're looking for with Apple is exactly what happened to Facebook. You're looking for a walk back up to the upper end of the range, a breakout, a pullback, a retest, and then likely a surge upwards. That's basically all I'm looking for with Apple. On to Amazon, same thing. Okay, we've been consolidating sideways forever on this one between about 2,900, probably a little bit more specifically 3,000. Okay, 2,900 is a snap buy in my opinion. Okay, you come down to 2,900 on this one, you're snap buying it. 3,000 is the bottom of the range, and the top of the range is 30. So call it 35.50 or so. To just keep the numbers round. Okay. So obviously, if you're doing options trading or you're doing your own trading, you're going to want to pull up these charts and really get into a more definitive number. When I shout out numbers, I'm kind of rounding them off just to keep them easy to say and easy for you to remember. So just keep that in mind when I'm throwing out figures here. But we're in this sideways consolidation. We're kind of in the middle of it to kind of down on this. You pull back to 3,000. I'd probably be interested in buying a share of this one or fractional shares maybe in my son's account. You break above, same thing with Apple and what happened to Facebook. You're looking for a break above 35.60 or so on this one. Big green candle, retest, and then momentum upwards. That will shoot us higher. Not exactly sure what will shoot Amazon higher, but something could happen. Same thing going on with Netflix. Sound like a broken record, right? Same thing going on with Netflix. We've been consolidating for months, dating back to like really almost a year now, actually. Okay, we're about 2 months off. This is like June or July of last year. We started consolidating between about we'll call that 470 up to about 560. We're right about in the middle of it, okay? And what we're looking for is a walk back all the way up here to 560. And we're looking for a big break, okay? Because this thing has broken above it and gotten rejected. We're looking for a big break, a retest. Notice how back here it broke above, and but it didn't get that initial pop, okay? Big volume stepped in right here, okay? They broke it. Big volume stepped in because they saw the initial green candle. But you want to wait, in my opinion, for it to come back down, retest, and then walk its way back up, because that is much more bullet sign than just the one green candle up above the top of a range. So that's kind of what I'm looking for with Netflix. Not necessarily a stock I want to go long, because I'm already long AT&T. I'm already long Disney. I'm already long Amazon. Okay, so I've got AT&T, obviously Discovery, and now and Turner. I'll get some additional shares of that. Disney, obviously, don't need to talk about how powerful they are. And I've got Amazon now. I've got MGM Studios, and I've got Apple, and I've got so I'm not looking necessarily for like a pure play in the streaming. But if they get into video games, I am watching very closely for Netflix's next catalyst, because if I think there is one there, I think you've got some value at 470 down here. You could trade this one as well. Typically, I speak from kind of a longer term perspective, but if you're trading this one, I'll pull back to 470 and you could rip this one up, $30, $40 a share and make a couple bucks on a trade. Now, moving on to Google, there's my trend line. So I had a bunch of trend lines here with with Google. So this thing was trading sideways, and then it would go up, trade sideways, go up, trade sideways, and then go up. So basically we're walking up this big trend line, and this trend line is intact until further notice. Okay. What would I expect with Google after what's been going on? We'd trade sideways here at 2370, and then we'd gap up here to 2500 at some point. You're really looking for a break above about 2430, almost 2450 on this one. You get above that, then yeah, this trend is intact and you're probably staircasing up even higher on Google. Let's switch it over to Microsoft. So Microsoft has been channeling so it channeled sideways, and it did what Facebook did, okay? It came up here, broke above the top of a range, which was at 230, broke above that, walked back down here to 230 again, and then boom, shot higher all the way up to the 260s on this one. And we've kind of pulled back. We're probably in what I would consider maybe kind of a new range, okay? This 240 level is looking like it's acting as a little level of support for Microsoft. Pull back to 240 could be a buying opportunity. Pull back to 230, I think, is definitely a buying opportunity. That has held very nicely here for Microsoft over the last few weeks. But Microsoft's kind of, in my opinion, could potentially be like Facebook, or these things could act like Google. Okay, I erased my Google chart, but Google kind of broke above a range and has just been walking higher and higher. You'd like to see that, obviously, if you're long these stocks. So those are the two possibilities, I think, with Microsoft and Facebook, and likely Google as well. Google's in a little different spot, but with Facebook, we've just breached our highs. We've kind of hit our head at a new consolidation area. So are we going to seesaw here, or are we going to be like Google and start what is, basically an uptrend? Like, are we going to do this with Facebook, where we're going to walk upwards or are we going to go sideways? I think that's the question we have as investors. So a lot of people have, just basically for the entire market as well. So what's going to happen with Microsoft? Okay, we basically have maybe a trend, something like that going on. Are we going to walk upwards, or are we going to find resistance and chop sideways? Again, if I knew the answer to this, guys, I'd be a multi-billionaire. I'm just telling you what you should look for, okay? Nobody has the answers for this. Everybody can make their best guess at what could happen, and some people have more experience at that than others and make a more educated guess. I'm just telling you what I am looking for, okay? Are we going to continue to bounce up with this one, or will we wave out sideways? We'll see what happens with Microsoft. Now, Tesla's a similar spot as well. So I had a bunch of lines with Tesla. What I'm noticing with Tesla is we are basically coiling. This is like a descending triangle, I think, from a chart perspective. And what this is actually kind of a bullish setup. Okay, you had a big run, and then now you've coiled here. Notice how we had these big swings, and they're getting shorter. That means this thing is coiling, and it wants to pop up or down. Okay, I know that's pretty much where any stock can go, but what you're looking for is a pop above this trend line, okay, wherever it's at. Right now, it would be about 650. You'd look for a big green candle above 650, and then you'd look to break these highs of about 750. That would bring $900 back in play, at least 850 back in play. Now, if we continue to coil down, we're looking for a break below 550, okay? If you're like me, you want more shares of Tesla and you don't want to pay a bunch, you're actually looking for this one to break down. You're actually rooting for, not necessarily just for Tesla, but probably a broader market thing. You're looking for this thing to break down, okay? You're looking for a break below 550. You break below 550, it brings the $400 per share in range, and that's where I would absolutely 100% be a buyer of Tesla, at least in the shorter term. Wouldn't necessarily push all my chips into the table on this one, but I would absolutely like to be a buyer down here. Now, here's the deal though. If we consolidate here for another couple days, maybe another week or so, and we can break above here, 630, 650, something like that, and it looks bullish in the shorter term, I probably would get on this one too. Maybe as a trade, maybe in like a Robinhood account, maybe, as a shorter term trade, not necessarily in my IRA account, because if you can break this triangle and we can get above here, look, 750s in play, 850s in play, potentially even $900 back in play with Tesla. So this is an exciting setup, in my opinion, probably the most exciting setup out of all the FAANG names, including Microsoft and Tesla. But we're also looking very closely to what Facebook and Microsoft are doing, because if they can keep walking up the ladder here, there's certainly some buying opportunities for that as well. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Guys, it's Friday. Have fun out there. Have a safe weekend. Monday is a holiday, and so we will do the weekend show probably on Sunday, because better believe I'm going to take my holiday, and I will do a weekend show on Sunday where we'll talk about crypto. We'll talk about Dogecoin, Bitcoin. We'll talk about Ethereum. We'll talk about the price action there as well. Talk about some of the other movements that we've been seeing in the stock market. Until then, have a great day. Good luck with your investments.